take our seats so we can start in about 2 minutes, please? Okay, it looks like everybody is seated, so let's get started with the South Atlantic Fisheries Management Board. My name is Patrick Gear. I'm the chairman of the committee, and I welcome you all here today. First order of business is to approve the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda, any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll consider them approved. And now the proceedings from May 2015, any changes to those proceedings? Any objections to the proceedings? Seeing none, we'll consider those approved as well. And we're falling apart up here. Is there any public comment? I didn't hear of anybody. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on. Okay, now we're on to item number 4 is considering the extension of the provision for the Addendum 1 on Spanish mackerel FMP for North Carolina. Just to give you a quick update on it, North Carolina had asked for 11.5-inch minimum for their commercial pound net for July through September. And they asked it for 2 years, and Michelle Duvall is going to give us a report out on that, and then we're going to make consideration on extending that. Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I'll be pretty brief. I think most folks have had a chance to look at the report. You'll see from the numbers that the overall proportion of harvest of Spanish mackerel from our pound net fishery is really low. It averages about, anywhere between 3 and 5% of our overall Spanish mackerel harvest. And you can see from the tables in the report that Spanish mackerel harvest in 2013, which was the first year this exemption from the minimum size limit was allowed, actually decreased pretty significantly. Not quite sure why that happened, but in general, the overall proportion of Spanish mackerel harvest from pound nets remained the same despite the rather significant decrease in overall commercial harvest. And I think one of the other things we saw was that based on our fishery-dependent sampling, that there actually was a fairly significant percentage of fish that were actually outside of that 11.5-inch size limit exemption. If you look at the Table 4 in the report, looking at 2013, 23% of according to our fish house sampling of fish were below 11.5 inches, and there's probably a number of reasons that led to this. The board, first of all, this is a fishery that occurs in a really small area. It's mostly just inside the Outer Banks along the eastern edge of Pamlico Sound. These fish are moving through at a pretty quick clip. This generally, for us, happens mostly in July and August is what we've heard from industry when these smaller fish are coming through. I think you can see that the majority of our harvest occurs like June, July, in August. And despite the fact that there was this rather higher proportion of undersized fish than what we expected in 2013, one of the other things that might have led to this was some decreased opportunities for fishery-dependent sampling. If those fish are coming through really quickly, that can decrease the ability of our biologists to get out there and get to the fish house before the fish actually leave and are moving out through markets. And I think just talking to staff, this appears to have been what happens, which impacts our ability to appropriately characterize a fishery. The fewer fish house samples we have, then when you do those extrapolations, there's a lot more uncertainty in those numbers. However, you see that in 2014, that proportion of undersized fish did go back down. So I think just to put things in perspective, even if you take those proportions from the July through September timeframe and apply them to sort of the overall harvest of fish that occurs during those months, I think it was something like 8,500 pounds total that were harvested underneath the minimum size limit. So it's a fairly small proportion. I think we're asking for the board's indulgence to allow for this program to continue for another 2 years and come back to you again with a report next year as to the results from 2015 sampling. I think we've had some mixed reviews from the industry. I think they thought that this might be a little bit more helpful to them, but it may be turning out that it is not saving them as much time as they thought in terms of just bailing the net and being able to visually account for whether or not these fish are within that size limit exemption, as opposed to having to actually take the time to measure them. This is a time of year when the fish tend to die pretty rapidly. The whole intent of this was to minimize those dead discards. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you very much, Michelle. Just to let everybody know, remind everybody that since their season began in July and we weren't meeting till August, we had an electronic vote, and the vote was unanimous to allow this to continue for this year. So I'll open the floor to any questions anybody has for Michelle. Okay, seeing none, we will need a motion for this extension. Jim Estes?
Let's see if I can do this pretty concisely. I move that we extend the Addendum 1 to the Spanish mackerel FMP for another 2 years and allow reporting on an annual basis from North Carolina.
As we're getting this on the board, and I have a second from Marty. And this would be for the 2015 and 2016 fishing seasons. Okay.
Yeah.
And it was seconded by Mr. Gray. Jim, was this your intent?
Yes.
All right, I'll read it real quick. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a clarification, and maybe I misunderstand, but is that the proper characteristic or characterization of what we're doing? This isn't the addendum. This is a provision that is allowed under the addendum. I'll look to Dr. Duvall for clarification.
Yes, thank you, Robert. I believe that would be the case, that we're simply asking for the provisions that are within the addendum to be extended for another 2 years.
We would need a rewording of this, Jim.
What Robert said. The provisions, move to extend the provisions of the Addendum 1. Of the Spanish mackerel FMP for another 2 years with annual reporting to the board.
Marty, that's okay with you? Okay, I'll read it and then we'll take a quick vote on that. Move to extend the provisions of the Addendum 1 of the Spanish mackerel FMP for another 2 years with annual reporting to the board. Motion by Mr. Estes and seconded by Mr. Gary. Do I see all in favor? Raise your hand. Opposed? Unanimous.
Motion carries unanimously. Motion carries.
Motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle, on that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the rest of the board. We very much appreciate this.
The next item on the agenda is an update of the traffic light assessment for Atlantic Croker and Spa. We've already seen some of this today, and it's going to be given by Harry Rickenbaugh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The traffic light was adopted in 2013 for both species. It requires that both the harvest and adult abundance composite indices exceed a threshold of either 30% for moderate management action or 60% for elevated management action. The threshold must be exceeded for 2 years for spot and 3 years for croaker. I'm going to start by going through croaker first. The whole presentation is basically going to be these charts. They're Keller proportion charts. And just as a quick refresher, the way the traffic light works is if the green to yellow proportion line is the long-term mean from the reference period, 1 confidence limit below, from the mean to 1 confidence limit below is the yellow proportion. This indicates an area where it's below average but still within acceptable range of variation. And then as you move into red, that would be 2 confidence limits below the mean of the reference period. So as you move into below that is when the proportion of red begins to increase. This first slide is the harvest component for the croaker, but it's the 2 different components that make up the composite. The top graph is commercial only. The bottom graph is recreational only. Commercial landings in 2014 declined 41% from those of 2013. This is a continued decline that began in 2005. The commercial landings were above 60% proportion of red for the past 2 years. The recreational landings also declined by 22%, and this was the third lowest value of the MRIP estimate time series. Again, these are the individual, not the ones that would trigger the management. The next slide is the composite of those 2. You can see the 30% level is on the graph, and that for croaker, for the harvest composite, the past 4 years have been above the 30%. Since the analysis was initiated in 2013, only years from 2013 on are considered tripped. So we have 2 years for the commercial that is tripped. Again, for croaker, it requires 3. Next, we'll go through the fishery independent. These are the 2 indices used for the adult abundance are the the Marine Fisheries Service Fall Groundfish Survey and the CMAP survey. The first one on the board here is the Groundfish Survey. It was showing basically around near mean levels for several years. Still is there, but now it's starting to show a little bit of red. The next survey is the CMAP survey. This one also was indicating above average catches through 2012 and 13, but declined sharply in 2014 by 64%. We also look at 2 juvenile indices for croaker. Now, these aren't part of the hard trigger, but are looked at to give us an idea of potential recruitment. The first one is a North Carolina juvenile index. It indicates strong year classes in 2010 and 2012, with more moderate to average year class in 2014. The second one is the VIMS trawl survey, and it indicates also fairly strong year classes in 2010 and 12, but extremely poor year class in 2014. The 2 composites for the fishery independent indices. The top one is the adult, which is the one that is part of the trigger. As you can see, it did not cross the 30% proportion in any recent years, but has shown a declining trend in the past couple of years. And the juvenile indices, as you would expect, are split for 2014 with a high proportion of red, which is driven by the VIMS index. And when you combine the two together, you do see those strong 2010 and 2012 year classes. So to sum it up, the harvest and adult indices did not trigger. However, the declining trends in all the indices, because they all were down in 2014, does bear further watching for the next few years. The TC is hoping to get better stock status for the current population and updated reference points from the stock assessment when it was just initiated. Do you want me to continue going through the spot, or do we want to stop for Croker?
Why don't we take any questions anybody has right now? So they don't. Do we have any questions? Any discussion? I just had one real quickly. Is there any explanation what happened with the VIMS trawl survey with the juveniles, that it was that bad?
One possible explanation is a hard winter we had in the northern region. Croker are very susceptible to winter kill as juveniles. That might be why you see that poor year class in the north and not in the south.
All right. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to spot.
Okay, same structure for this part of the presentation, just as for spot. The commercial is on the top again and recreation on the bottom. These are the individual, not the composite index. Commercial landings were down 76% in 2014. That's continuing a decline that began in 2004. If you look at the graph, it's basically been on a declining trend with alternating years with increasing declines. The recreational harvest on the bottom did increase by about 10% in 2014, but is still below the long-term mean and is still showing a small proportion of red. When you look at the combined composite index, you'll see that every other year for the past 5 years has been above the 30% threshold, but 2013 was not. So technically this would not have tripped as part of the trigger exercise. Then again, we'll look at the same two trawl surveys were used for the abundant characteristics for adults, and that's the fall groundfish survey that's on the screen now. Indicated above average catches. Actually, the highest catch or the highest index on record was in 2012, but it's declined sharply the past 2 years. 2014 was a 90% decline from 2013. In a short-lived species like spot, some of these rapid changes aren't out of the usual. CMAP, on the other hand, was also down in 2013, had an increase in 2014, but still was around 30% proportion of red. For spot, we only used one juvenile index. It's the Maryland Striped Bass Seine survey. As you can see, it's pretty variable, as you expect with a juvenile index, but the past 4 years have been average to below average, including a very poor year in 2011. Looking at the composite index on the top, this would be for the adult abundance characteristic. It was above the 30% portion of red in both 2013 and 2014. So this part of the trigger did trip. However, since the commercial did not trip, management action would not be required at this time. Given that all composite indices are showing increased proportions of red, there is cause for concern with spot. Given that the benchmark stock assessment has begun, much like Croker, this is the initial stock assessment for spot, however, so the PRT is hoping that we can get a better picture of stock status and hopefully some biological reference points to compare those two from the stock assessment. With that, I'm happy to take any other questions.
Any questions for Harry? Nope, seeing none. All right, thank you very much, Harry. We're looking forward to seeing these stock assessments and what comes out of those in the next couple of years. All right, the next item on the agenda is the stock assessment updates by Jeff Kipp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to be giving two updates on current stock assessments. The first, red drum, is wrapping up now. That assessment will be peer-reviewed August 24th through 27th in Charleston. That's undergoing a CDAR peer review. So again, those results from that assessment and peer review will be presented at the annual meeting. The other assessments are the Atlanta Croker and spot assessments. Those assessments will be going through joint assessments, and the data workshop for those assessments will be occurring in September, the end of September, down in Raleigh, North Carolina. Again, for those assessments, they will be going under a CDAR peer review next year, and those will be made available at the annual meeting in 2016. So, if there are any questions about those assessments, I'd be glad to take them now.
Any questions? We're all waiting for that annual meeting when we get to sit here for red drum. Better give us a little bit more than 90 minutes for the meeting. Are you ready to move on to the terms for Croker?
So revisiting the spot and Croker stock assessment, I'll be going over the terms of reference for those stock assessments, again, a joint stock assessment for both those species. Just to review, the terms of reference have you seen for all of our previous assessments are to guide the stock assessment and peer review of that assessment. These were developed by the Atlanta Croker Technical Committee, Spot Plan Review Team, and the Atlanta Croker and Spot Joint Stock Assessment Subcommittee. And those are these will be the same two ROs for both species. I'll go over the ones for Atlanta Croker here, but again, it's just the same two Rs for Spot. And I'll be going over a summarized set of the TORs that you got in your meeting materials. The first term of reference will be to characterize uncertainty of all the fishery-dependent and fishery-independent data used in the assessments. Review estimates of PSEs and MRIP recreational fishing estimates. Request participation of MRIP staff in the data workshop process to compare historical and current data collection and estimation procedures, and to describe data caveats that may affect the assessment. Develop estimates of Atlantic croaker discards in the South Atlantic shrimp trawl fishery. Develop estimates of bycatch and discards in other fisheries where possible. And characterize uncertainty of all discards and bycatch estimates. And again, we'll have the same TOR for spot. Develop models used to estimate population parameters and biological reference points and analyze model performance. State assumptions made for all models and explain the likely effects of assumption violations on synthesis of input data and all model outputs. Characterize the uncertainty of model estimates and biological and empirical reference points. Perform retrospective analyses, assess magnitude and direction of retrospective patterns detected, and discuss implications of any observed retrospective pattern for uncertainty in population parameters, reference points, and/or management measures. Recommend stock status as related to reference points. And also evaluate other potential scientific issues specific for spot and croaker. We'll compare trends in population parameters and reference points with the current and proposed modeling approaches and assessment to the traffic light approach, which Harry just went over. If outcomes differ, discuss potential causes of observed discrepancies. And also compare reference points derived in this assessment with what is known about the general life history of the exploited stocks and explain any inconsistencies. If a minority report has been filed, explain majority reasoning against adopting approach suggested in that report. The minority report should explain reasoning against adopting approach suggested by the majority. Develop detailed short and long-term prioritized lists of recommendations for future research, data collection and assessment methodology, and highlight improvements to be made by the next benchmark review. And the final TOR is to recommend timing of next benchmark assessments and intermediate updates, if necessary, relative to the biology and current management of spot and Atlantic croaker. And that covers all the TORs for the stock assessment. And if there are any questions on those, I'd be glad to take those.
Are there any questions? Okay, and Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the terms of reference as presented.
Do I see a second? Russ Allen. Are there any objections? Any other comments on the motion? I move that we, seeing no objections, I move that we accept the terms of reference. As motion by Mr. Boyles, as seconded by Mr. Allen. Okay. All right. Tony?
Just a quick update for the board. The Spot and Croaker Committee had requested that instead of going through a CDAR review, that we go through an ASMFC external peer review. Without objection from this board, we would have the ASC look at that and then talk to CDAR about potentially removing us from 2016 for this peer review approach.
Is there any objection to that? We don't have to do a motion or anything on that, do we?
We'll take that to the ASC, okay. And then it would be considered at the policy board in the annual meeting.
Okay. Do you want me to read the motion again? I just move to accept the terms of reference for the Atlantic croaker assessment as presented. Motion by Mr. Boyles and seconded by Mr. Allen. Motion was carried unanimously. So,
since that motion didn't include Spot, we'll need...
That's what I was thinking too.
We'll need a second motion similar like for Spot.
Robert.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I move that we accept the terms of reference for Spot as presented.
I need a second on the motion. Let's go with Michelle.
I'll need you to read it.
I'll read it. Robert, didn't you? Well, never mind. I thought you said both, but maybe you didn't. All right, move to accept the terms of reference for the spot assessment as presented. Motion by Mr. Boyles, seconded by Dr. Duvall. Any objection? Seeing none, motion approved. Okay. Jeff, is there anything else? All right, thank you very much, Jeff. We appreciate it. The last item on the agenda is the fisheries management plan reviews, and we've got 3 of them. So we're going to, Megan's going to go through each one, and then we're going to approve the plan and the compliance reports in a de minimis for each one. So just to keep it a little bit cleaner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first one that I'll be going through is Atlantic croaker. In terms of status of the fishery, this graph here is showing total harvest with the blue bars commercial harvest and the recreational harvest in red. Overall, there has been a decrease in landings in the Atlantic croaker fishery since 2003. And this figure shows the total catch of both commercial and recreational landings. In 2014, Atlantic croaker harvest was estimated at 10.07 million pounds, and this represents a 75% decline since the peak of 41.2 6.2 million pounds in 2001. Looking specifically at the trends in the commercial sector, which is again those blue bars, landings have decreased from a high of 30.1 million pounds in 2001 to 7 million pounds in 2014, and this does register below the time series average of 13.4 million pounds. The majority of commercial landings came from Virginia and North Carolina. Looking specifically at recreational catch, we have a graph here that shows the number of fish, not pounds, but number, and the blue bars are landings, and the green bars are those that were released alive. The number of fish recreationally caught has declined in the last decade. The 2014 landings are estimated at 6.2 million fish, and Virginia was responsible for the majority of this. And that was then followed by Maryland. In 2014, anglers released roughly 10 million fish, which is 62% of the croaker catch. In terms of status of the stock, our latest assessment is the 2010 assessment, and this found that the stock is not experiencing overfishing. However, model estimates of the spawning stock biomass were too uncertain to be used to precisely determine an overfished stock status. And as we just saw from Harry, the traffic light analysis shows a declining harvest and abundance indices, and we will be looking forward to the 2016 stock assessments for some new information. In terms of state compliance and de minimis requests, we are currently under Amendment 1, and since there are no specific management measures restricting harvest in Amendment 1, the PRT finds that all states have fulfilled the requirements of Amendment 1. For de minimis status, states are permitted to request de minimis status if for the preceding 3 years their average commercial landings or recreational landings constitute less than 1% of the coastwide commercial or recreational landings for that same 3-year period. And we had requests from 4 states. We had requests from Delaware in their commercial fishery, South Carolina in their commercial fishery, Georgia in their commercial and recreational fishery, and Florida in their commercial fishery. And we found that all of these states did qualify for de minimis. However, de minimis does not exempt any of the states from compliance requirements. In terms of recommendations, the PRT does recommend the board approve the 2014 Atlantic Croaker FMP review, state compliance reports, and de minimis status for Delaware, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. And they suggest that the board review the stock status after the 2016 assessment. And for research, their top 3 priorities were to develop and implement sampling programs for the South Atlantic shrimp trawl fishery in order to analyze Atlantic croaker bycatch, to continue fishery independent surveys throughout the range, but especially in the southern range, and then to determine migratory patterns through cooperative tagging studies. So with that, I will take any questions and wait for board action.
Any questions for Megan? Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just prepared to offer a motion if there were no questions.
Are there any questions or comments? We'll take that motion at this time.
So I would move to approve the Atlantic Croaker FMP review, the state compliance reports, and the de minimis requests for Delaware, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida.
Second to that motion, let's go Robert Boyles.
Pat, I think we may need to clarify commercial and recreational, because I think Delaware, South Carolina, and Florida were just commercial, and Georgia was both, or something along those lines.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we'll perfect the motion here.
Okay. I was going to say, if it said de minimis request, would that cover that?
Either way, I think Max is almost done.
Okay.
He's quick.
And Florida was both commercial only? Mm-hmm. Okay. Dr. Duvall, you okay with that? Mr. Boyles? right, let me read the motion. Move to approve the 2015 Atlantic Croaker FMP reviews, state compliance reports, and de minimis status for Delaware commercial, South Carolina commercial, Georgia commercial and recreational, and Florida commercial. Motion by Dr. Duvall, seconded by Mr. Boyles. Any opposition to that? Everyone's in favor? Seeing no opposition, motion carried unanimously. Okay, now we've got, move on to Red Drum.
Yes, this is now the FMP review for Red Drum. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this year shows total landings of Red Drum in kind of that pink color from New Jersey through the east coast of Florida. And the total landing estimates for 2014 are 2.45 million pounds. This represents roughly a 650,000 pound decrease from 2013, but it is above the 10-year average. Looking just at commercial landings, which are the black bars at the bottom of the graph, they represent just 4% of landings in 2014, and they really show no particular temporal trends, ranging from approximately 55,000 to 440,000 pounds over the last 50 years. In 2014, coastwide commercial harvests decreased from just over 400,000 pounds in 2013 to just over 100,000 pounds, and 88% of these landings are coming from North Carolina. And in North Carolina, the commercial harvest is unique in that it's capped by a 250,000 pound annual cap, and their fishing season is from September 1st through August 31st. So just as a reminder, in November 2013, the harvest exceeded the cap for the 2013-2014 fishing year, and it was closed. So the annual cap for the 2014-2015 season has been reduced to account for this overage. Looking specifically at recreational catch, this graph shows catch again in numbers of fish with the releases in yellow and harvest in blue. Recreational harvest of red drum peaked in 1984 at just over 1 million fish, and since 1988 that number has fluctuated between 250,000 and 760,000 fish. In 2014 we were at the higher end of that range with just over 641,000 fish, and this is higher than the 10-year average. Florida anglers landed the largest share of this coastwide recreational harvest, followed by North Carolina and then South Carolina. And anglers release far more red drum than they keep, and the percentage of catch has generally been around 80%, and specifically for 2014, anglers released 83%. In terms of the location of the catch, 57% of total landings are from the South Atlantic region in 2014, and this is where the fishery is exclusively recreational. So just as a reminder, Florida prohibited commercial harvest in 1988, South Carolina banned commercial harvest or sale of native caught red drum in 1987, and then most recently in 2013, Georgia designated red drum as game fish status. And then the rest of these 43% of total landings are coming from the mid-Atlantic, and those are shown in the darker gray colors with the commercial sector shown in the darkest gray. In terms of status of the stock, our most recent approved assessment is the 2009 stock assessment, which found that overfishing is not occurring. However, there was relatively little known about the adult population of red drum, since these fish are primarily found offshore in waters where red drum are prohibited being caught under federal law. So the end result of this was a limitation in the stock assessment that did not adequately describe the adult component of the population. And right now, as Jeff mentioned, we have the 2015 stock assessment underway, and it will be going through peer review later this month. In terms of the status of management, we're currently under Amendment 2, which considers a static spawning potential ratio of 40% a target and a static spawning potential ratio below 30% to result in an overfishing determination. All states in the management area were required to implement appropriate recreational bag and size limit combinations needed to achieve this target. And Amendment 2 also required states to maintain or implement more restrictive commercial fishery regulations, and then also required a max size of 27 inches. And all states have implemented these regulations and are found to be in compliance. So the PRT finds that all states have fulfilled the core requirements of Amendment 2. In terms of de minimis status, Amendment 2 states that a state may be granted de minimis if the board determines that action by a state would not contribute significantly to the overall management program. However, no time period or percent or fishery is specified. So what the PRT has been using is to evaluate the state's contribution to the fishery by comparing each state's 2-year average of combined commercial and recreational landings to the management unit. And we had 2 de minimis requests, one from New Jersey and one from Delaware, and we found that they qualify for de minimis. However, again, this does not exempt any states from compliance requirements. So recommendations from the PRT are to approve the FMP review, state compliance reports, and de minimis status. And for research, their top 2 priorities are to improve catch and effort estimates and biological sampling to determine the size and age structure of regulatory discards, and also to explore methods to effectively sample the adult population. And with that, we'll take any questions and then board action.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan, good presentation. On your slide depicted the proportion of the recreational take. You characterized it as Mid-Atlantic, South Atlantic. Is that parallel to what is considered under the last stock assessment, the 09 stock assessment, the northern substock and the southern substock? Or maybe the better way to ask that question, what is considered Mid-Atlantic? Is it Virginia North?
So it's the northern half is from North Carolina up.
Thank you.
Yep.
Robert again.
Mr. Chairman, if you, with no more questions, I'd offer a motion that we approve the FMP review as well as the de minimis request from New Jersey and Delaware for red drum.
Do we get a second on that? Michelle? So motion by Mr. Boyles and seconded by Dr. Duvall. Okay. All right, the motion as it is move to approve the 2015 Red Drum FMP review, state compliance reports, and de minimis status for New Jersey and Delaware. Motion by Mr. Boyle, seconded by Dr. Duvall. Now, is that separated into commercial and recreational, or just?
It's combined commercial and recreational.
Okay. Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? Any opposition? I'll consider the motion carried unanimously. All right, thank you. Now we're on to the last one, black drum.
All right, so in terms of total black drum harvest in 2000, I should just say before this is the first FMP review for black drum, and the compliance reports were due March 1st, so there wasn't enough time for states to get their 2014 recreational and commercial harvest information together, so this is going to be on 2013 landings, just so you know. So total black drum harvest in 2013 is estimated at 1.8 million pounds, and this represents an 84% increase from total harvest in 2012, but it is still below the previous 10-year average. And the fishery is primarily recreational, which is shown in the white bars here, with 84% of harvest coming from the recreational sector. If we look at the black bars, which is the commercial sector, landings show no particular temporal trends over the last 10 years. And in 2013, coastwide commercial harvest increased from roughly 237,000 pounds in 2012 to 284,000 pounds in 2013. The majority of this catch is coming from North Carolina. Looking specifically at recreational catch of black drum, again, this is in numbers of fish. We have those released in yellow and the harvest in blue. Recreational harvest of black drum peaked in 2008 with 789,000 fish, and then in 2013, harvest was just over 600,000 fish. North Carolina anglers landed the largest share of this coastwide recreational harvest, followed by Florida. And anglers release approximately the same number of black drum that they keep, and this proportion was 47% in 2013. If we look at the status of the stock, we have our most recent stock assessment from 2015, which said that the stock is not overfished and not experiencing overfishing. However, the median biomass is estimated to be slowly declining, although it is estimated to be well above that level necessary to produce maximum sustainable yield. In terms of the status of management, we are working off of the 2013 Interstate Fishery Management Plan, and some of the measures of that plan require states to implement a maximum possession limit and also a minimum size. So it had to be 12 inches by January 1st, 2014, and it must be 14 inches by January 1st, 2016. And as of January 1st, 2014, all states have implemented a minimum size of 14 inches, so everyone is in compliance and ahead of schedule. So the PRT finds that all states have fulfilled the requirements of the Interstate Fishery Management Plan for black drum. For de minimis, it is qualified that a state can apply for de minimis if for the 3 preceding years for which data is available, their average combined commercial and recreational landings constitute less than 1% of the coastwide landings. However, we did not get any requests for de minimis status. So the PRT recommends that the board approve the 2014 Black Drum Fishery Management Plan review and state compliance reports. And they also suggested that as more data becomes available and these size increases are there for a couple years, to really review the impact of increased minimum size. And for research, their top 3 priorities are to collect information to characterize the size composition of fish discarded, to collect age samples, especially in states where the maximum size regulations preclude the collection of adults, and to obtain estimates of selectivity at age for the commercial fisheries by gear. And with that, I'll take any questions and wait for board action.
Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Megan, you mentioned the compliance report due date precluded us looking at the 14 data. Is that something we need to consider changing the due date?
Potentially, I'm not sure if that's board action would require that, but that is to the pleasure of the board.
Yeah, we've had that problem too, Robert.
If the board would like to change the compliance date, we can do that. You don't have to have a motion if there's consensus of the board, and then we can update that in our documents and make the changes to when we send out the memos. We may need to confer back with maybe your technical committee members to see what would be the appropriate time for folks to be able to get the data in, so when they have the data to get it to us, to line it up.
Robert.
I'm not clear whether it might have been a problem for my folks. I don't know. I'm a little ignorant, but I'd look to guidance from the other members of the board on what might be a better date so that we're looking at more recent data. I mean, I think we could make a March 1st deadline for the previous year, but I'm a little in the dark. I'm not quite sure. Maybe, Tony, you can help me out.
Tony and then Michelle.
I believe what Megan said is that the data were not available yet, and so it's when the data come in, not necessarily that you couldn't work it up. And so that's why I would suggest maybe get some information back from the technical committee folks or the individuals that are submitting, and then come back at the annual meeting and suggest a new compliance date.
That sounds like a good idea. I see heads nodding, so that's, you don't want to go ahead and create a date and find out it's worse than the one we have now, so, okay. All right, any other questions or comments on the black drum? I'm going to need a motion. Michelle?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that we approve the Black Drum FMP review and state compliance reports.
Okay, do I have a second? I have a second from Wilson Laney. Let's get the pressure. Okay, the motion is moved to approve the 2015 Black Drum FMP review and state compliance reports. Motion by Dr. Duvall, seconded by Dr. Laney. Any further discussion? Hearing none. No opposition. Everyone's okay. Motion carried unanimously. This group is easy. Okay.
There's one piece of other business.
You have one more thing?
Yeah.
Okay. Megan?
So just one other piece of other business. This was included in, I believe, your briefing materials, but I just wanted to let everyone know that NIMS did implement management measures in Framework Amendment 2 to the Fishery Management Plan for the coastal migratory pelagic resources in the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic region, and this does impact Spanish mackerel. So just to go over, the final rule establishes a commercial trip limit of 3,500 pounds for Spanish mackerel in federal waters offshore of South Carolina, Georgia, and eastern Florida. And then when 75% of this adjusted southern zone quota is met, the commercial trip limit will be reduced to 1,500 pounds. And then when 100% of the adjusted quota is met, the commercial trip limit will be reduced to 500 pounds. So I just wanted to let everyone know that information is in your briefing materials about that in case states have to make any changes.
Thank you very much, Megan. Is there any new business in front of this board at this time? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, and safe travels, everybody.